Founder Culture, the podcast for founders and startup leaders who understand that building a business may be hard, but building a team, now that's where things get tricky. I'm Romaine Wright, founder of Just Right Consulting LLC and creator of Thrive or Derive. In every episode, I take one real team issue, break down the behaviors driving it, and provide strategies on how to fix it. Welcome to the show. So I am excited to be joined in the studio today by a special guest, Ben Kenyon. So Ben Kenyon is the founder and CEO of Climb Performance Coaching, a performance company that translates NBA sports science into programs for high-performing professionals. Ben, welcome to the show.
What's happening, Romaine? How you doing? Thank you for having me.
No problem. Excited for this conversation.
Yeah.
So I recorded an episode on responsibility hoarding and that being something that can lead to burnout. And I invited you on the show because I know that you teach and talk a ton about burnout and how to prevent and avoid it. And so I want us to talk about that today and jump right in at the baseline. So from your experience, your perspective, what is burnout and what could it look like?
Yeah, so two awesome questions. Burnout to me is a person that is, or a person that's on the journey to burnout. They are doing a little too much. They're overthinking, they're undersleeping, they're undervaluing maybe their time, right? A lot of things are starting to fall apart. And so realistically, the way I kind of frame it now is just you've kind of gone off the hinges, right? You've gone off the rails. And everybody in their life, it looks different, right? Kind of comparing it to my journey in the NBA, I remember my first year where the treadmill, the figurative treadmill was going about 25 miles per hour. And I remember falling off, right? And saying, man, right, these last 3 road trips were no joke, right? Ended up getting, 4 hours of sleep. Ended up putting on an extra 15 pounds of, I don't know if it was muscle, but I put on an extra 15 pounds, right? I started to see myself unraveling slowly. And so again, falling off the rails, right? Not being aligned with what I thought was necessary in that season of life. For me, that was burnout. And a lot of the times people, they don't see it, right? It's disguised as, oh, I'm going to overcommit now and be extra disciplined, right? And sometimes that's not the thing. Sometimes you need to let go of a few things, which we'll talk more about. But again, burnout to me is just a person that's pretty much overdoing it, going down a path that they clearly feel doesn't align with them, but they haven't really come to grips with it just yet.
Yeah, 2 things that you said that I want to highlight that I don't think people think about regarding burnout, because it's a word we hear a lot, but it's a word we don't understand really well.
Yeah.
And the 2 things you said that really stood out is it looks different for different people and that people don't see it coming.
Yeah.
Right? And it makes sense because if you have described your burnout story and I'm not experiencing that, then it's easy to ignore the signs that I'm burning out, right? So can you expand on that a little bit, like in the work that you've done in the NBA and now as an executive coach, what are some things that you see in people that's like, oh, that could be burnout, let's examine that?
I'll start with this one. Actually, I might even stop here. It's your personal relationships, right? I think if you can actually pay attention to how you're showing up at home, right? If you have the family, in what you're doing in that space, and then at work as well, right? So if you're continuing to micromanage, overthink things, hold on to projects a little too long because you're trying to be a perfectionist, right? Those are small signs that, you may need to slow down and press the reset button, right? And I always go back to, your interactions because community is so important. And they're sometimes the mirror for you, right? There's sometimes the group of people that can say, hey, I get it's busy season right now, but like it seems like, you're off your routine. You typically work out at X time. You typically, come home to do X, Y, and Z, and you just haven't done it in the last 3 weeks, right? It's not just like 1 or 2 days. You've done this the past 30 days. And so I'll say, those 2 things are huge. And then one huge thing that actually popped up for me when I was with the Blazers was loneliness, right? I disguised, me going for my long runs, right, as decompression time. But I knew I needed to connect with somebody that just kind of understood where I was at, right? I disguised my moments of sitting down because work was just so frantic, right? At home, solo by myself, as like, oh, this is my time to recover. Like, no. Like, get up, get in some community, and make sure that you're actually going down a path to stay aligned, right? Stay with people that really do care about you growing.
That's a really good call out that I never associated with burnout, is loneliness and feeling like you haven't made connections with like-minded people. And I called that out because for some, like I'm thinking, oh, you're going for runs. That's like self-care. But what I heard you say is I disguised it as self-care, but what it really was me detaching from or trying to cope with not having deep connections in that place.
And what I love that you just said was the cope, right? We all have different coping mechanisms.
Right.
Fitness is one of my things I love. Like, I'm obsessed with it. But I also know that it can be detrimental, right? If I start to use it and weaponize it that way, right? So if I continue to say, hey, I'm going to go for this long run or long bike ride, and it starts to drag me away from my responsibilities, now we're headed down that path. But again, it goes back to understanding, like, what are your triggers or your coping mechanisms that you now lean into, because that's something that will help you at least press pause to understand, like, am I going down this path, or am I just leaning into, in a positive way, leaning into these things that I know can help me grow?
Yeah, so you also just brought up another thing that I was thinking as you were saying or responding.
Yeah.
And you didn't call it out by name, but I'm going to call it out by name because that's what I do.
Yeah.
You mentioned knowing what your triggers are and all of that, and that's of course self-awareness, right?
Yep.
And I've found throughout my career, both as an entrepreneur, but doing professional development work for many years, that most people, especially leaders, especially senior leaders, are vastly unaware. Like, they don't know themselves at all. Yeah. So what are you doing in your work to help people become more self-aware so they can identify, oh, this could be something I need to keep an eye on?
Yeah, so step one is always going down the diagnostics road for me. And so where we're at today, a lot of what I focus on is, we do food sensitivity testing. We strap Whoop straps on folks. We also do subjective questionnaires that I'll talk about in a second. But those tools are helping me understand, from a food standpoint, what your body just reacts poorly to. From a central nervous standpoint, how your body's actually reacting on a day-to-day basis. So are you getting enough sleep? Are you actually recovering properly? And if you're not, it's fine, but we're aware of it now, right? We can now make certain interventions or do certain interventions to actually move the needle forward. And so those are like the first two places that I love to start, with the blood test, with the food sensitivity test, and then also putting on a Whoop strap and making sure that we can actually pay attention to what your nervous system's going through. And then the third thing I mentioned was the rate your day. We called it in sports, it was the RPE, so it was rate of perceived exertion. And after a workout, we would ask our guys, or we hold a chart up that had a color scale, right? So it started with green, went all the way to red. Green was at 1, red was at 10, right? So, and then the middle was like, I think like orangish, right? We would ask, how stressful, how hard was the day, right?
Okay.
If they said the day was 10, okay, we now know maybe tomorrow, or that reset that they go through needs to be something that intervenes that 10, right? So now when you go to business athletes, we ask the same question. Rate your day. How stressful was that, right? If it was a 10, we now know, okay, if I do 5 10s in a row, this is the reset that I actually need to do. So again, building out a process that actually allows you to see it subjectively, which that's the rate your day scale, and then objectively with the Whoop strap or ring, any wearable, right? And then on top of it, the blood test is like where we actually start.
Wow, so that's the MBA science because because I meet a lot of people that do this kind of work.
Yeah.
And you're the first I've ever met that is spending time on the physiological dynamics that affect your ability to perform as a professional, right? As an entrepreneur, as an executive, as a leader, which I am fascinated by because I didn't make the connection. And since we're talking about burnout, it absolutely relates to burnout because you physically, mentally crash, right? When you're burnt out and really can't function. And so I think it's really cool that you have combined, as you said, that MBA science, right? Taking what you've learned and what you established in the MBA and now translating into the workplace, into the, marketplace of professional development and leadership development. So as we kind of close, I want to give the opportunity for you to share any last thoughts, strategies, tips, ideas that you have, or anything else you would like to share for the listeners.
Yeah. So when it comes to this process of going through the journey of burnout, I want you to get close to the sun, but not touch it, right? And the reason I want you to get close is because that builds up resilience, right? So I can't remember the official name of it, but there's that stress curve, right?
Bell curve.
The bell curve, right? There's an optimal point that allows us to know, like, oh man, we're getting better right now, right? But then there's that tipping point where it's just like, we're doing a little too much,
right?
So over time, I want people to continue to intermittently push, right? I'm not saying any of the things that I do, just call it a day, right? Take 3 weeks off because you just need 3 weeks off. No, we got to push. We got to be more resilient. We've got to, as David Goggins says, we got to callous ourselves, right? Because life business is not easy, right? So understand that we need to push. And then the second thing is the process that I love going through is prepare, perform, recover. So that process allows you to now know, okay, here's, a stressful season coming up. The next 2 weeks are going to be pretty hard personally and professionally, right? I've got a lot going on. How am I preparing for that? In that section of preparation, nutrition, sleep, exercise, recovery, what am I doing? Let's go to perform, right? How am I performing when I'm actually doing the podcast, showing up at work, right? Showing up at home, exercise, sleep, nutrition, recovery, right? Where am I at when it comes to my 1 to 10 scale, right? Am I paying attention to that? And then the same thing on the recovery portion of it. Where am I at when it comes to sleep? What am I eating right before bed? What's my wind down routine, right? All those things matter. It's just for you to figure out where to start and establish that first brick, right? I've shared all the things just now, right? From the science to the tangible. I just want people to take at least one thing and just put it to use today.
That's the important thing, right? You don't have to do it all.
No.
Eat the elephant one bite at a time, right?
Come on.
So that was perfect. And I agree, you gave tons of different strategies. And if people can take just one and commit to that, the change will be significant. Yeah.
Well, that's what separates, the greats from the Hall of Famers, right? The people that truly do want, to be the best in their space at what they do. They figure out, oh man, this is the one thing I can actually like hone in on because it just feels natural, it feels awesome, right? So let me hone in on that. Maybe that's for the rest of the year, right? Maybe that's the thing that you end up doing for just, the next 365. And then you see another thing. Romaine did this cool thing the other day that I really, really liked, or she shared something on the pod that I really, really liked. Boom, now you've got two, right? And I always look at, the athletes that had those stellar 15 plus year careers. If you go back to when they first started, they just kept adding things, people, places, and things to their whole repertoire that allowed that day, that week, that month, that year to be just way more efficient. And so if you can do that, you can now put yourself in the category of like a Tyrese Maxey or a Dame Lillard or Joel, right? And it's not always about their athleticism, so it's not about just the talent. It's about the process that they just were able to actually adapt to who they are over time. So again, if you can figure out one thing to start with, give yourself grace, right? We're gonna have moments, and understand that adding it over time is just because you've matured, you've grown, and now you've pretty much mastered that one thing. And then when you add that new habit, routine, whatever it is, you're going to run with it because you saw the benefits of the last one you added it.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it's progress makes perfect, right?
Come on.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for being on the show and giving me some things to think about for myself.
Come
So
on.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
For those of you listening and watching, hop in the show notes to read more about Ben and his work. And if this resonated with you and you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment. Let us know your thoughts. Also, in the show notes is Ben's contact information and my information. Either one of us can help you depending on the approach that you want to take to becoming a better leader. And until next time, build trust and results will follow.